This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. We've got another great show for you, which is something I don't feel obligated to say because it's always true. Anyway, we all know housing in the US is getting more expensive all the time, especially lately. A real estate research firm found that rents across the country increased by about 11% last year. One of the last affordable housing options left in America are mobile homes, but people are being priced out of those too. A growing number of investors are buying up these parks as many of the longtime owners are retiring and looking to sell. While many people own their mobile homes, they still have to pay rent for the land they sit on. When investors come in, they're known to raise that rent and other fees. One report from June of 2021 showed investors made up almost a quarter of mobile home park purchases between 2019 and 2021. Compared to the 2-year period before, there was a 13% increase in investor ownership. Mobile Home Park University is an organization that runs a boot camp to help investors looking to buy these parks. According to them, the fact that tenants can't afford the $5,000 it costs to move a mobile home keeps revenues stable and makes it easy to raise rents without losing any occupancy. More than 22 million Americans live in mobile homes, and policy experts say they could face up to a 70% rent increase. It generally comes down to what the investor decides. For these residents, an increase would have a significant impact on their ability to keep up with their finances. We sat down with George McCarthy, president and CEO of the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. As he explains, these residents are left with nowhere else to go.
If they can't afford the land rent and they get displaced, they end up losing their homes as well. And they end up having to abandon the homes, and the homes end up falling into the ownership of the park owners who can then rent them to somebody else.
As we've talked about on the show before, affordable housing options are limited, and only 1 of 4 low-income households eligible for federal housing assistance actually receive it. The federal mortgage company Fannie Mae says the annual median household salary of mobile homeowners is about $35,000, which is half of the annual median income for people who own homes built on site. The thing is, these investors aren't necessarily acting alone. They're doing this with government support. Investors have access to government loans from agencies like Fannie Mae, who, as we just saw, acknowledge those mobile homeowners tend to be lower income.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have a mission that requires them to preserve the affordable housing stock in the United States. And it's ironic that they're actually giving money to these private equity people who are actually making the most affordable housing in the United States less affordable all the time.
To combat this problem, some mobile home park residents are coming together to try and buy their park so they have more agency over the decisions made. But it can be difficult because they don't qualify for the same government loans that the investors do.
A lot of them are able to buy their parks instead of the investors. But when they do it with less attractive financing that's usually provided by, mission-driven organizations like community development finance institutions, right? And that's generally probably, the interest rates are close to twice as high for those kinds of loans as they would be from the financing from the Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. So once the community gets control of these parks, they make the investments in the park to improve them. They add community centers, they add new infrastructure, they add covered bus stops for their kids. I mean, the kinds of things that the community needs. And they don't raise the rent on themselves.
There's been a push for state legislation requiring park owners to notify residents when they plan to sell so they have time to organize and decide if they want to make an offer. But only a handful of states like Massachusetts and New Hampshire have made this happen.
But little by little, as people get more and more aware of it, the states are acting and the state legislators are pushing through these opportunity to purchase legislation. So that's a good thing.
We have with us Kevin Borden of MH Action, an organization that fights for affordable housing and economic security within manufactured home communities. They help these residents become leaders so they can better advocate for themselves. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us on this issue of investors coming in and purchasing mobile home parks. How have you seen this impact residents through your work?
Thanks so much for having us on. It's such an important topic. When you look back at all the different real estate sectors, if you thought of them as a particular niche, like commercial real estate, storage units, multifamily units, manufactured home communities. Manufactured home communities has been, unfortunately, producing the highest rate of return in terms of real estate investments right now. And you've seen it cause real harm, like communities, suddenly neighbors are getting moved out and, economically evicted, which is the same as being evicted. It's like if you're getting gentrified, right? We've seen it in Brooklyn. You see it in, the Bay Area and Seattle. It's happening now in manufactured home communities where the price is just skyrocketing at such a high level. And the investors are fine with that because they know a bunch of families we're all scrambling around to try to find affordable housing options. And, so that they know that the demand is there too if it doesn't work for a particular family.
When residents get pushed out of these parks, I mean, and understanding that so many people are probably having very different experiences, but when they do get pushed out of these parks, where does that leave them?
We've seen a mixture of things happen. Folks, if they're lucky, they can potentially move back in with another family member or relative that's close by. Some folks clearly just become a part of, the houseless population. They become homeless. I think the thing we have to think about, it's like this predatory business model is not only like displacing families from their communities. It's like we know that there's very significant health impacts when people aren't able to find a decent, affordable home. And so I think families are not only getting displaced from the communities, they're getting displaced from the planet. Right? It's like their lives are being shortened because they're faced with so much stress of not having a place to go home every night. We have waterfalls of anecdotes coming to us every day where the residents will say, "Oh my gosh, we just got bought out by XYZ corporation. We're suddenly now sending our checks, to some city 5 states away, and I just realized like." My street's totally changed. Like 5 of my neighbors are gone. There's empty pads. And so like we're seeing a lot of that. The other response and why we exist as an organization is people are like, they're putting their foot down. This isn't right. This isn't moral. This is a bad business model. And we're going to organize for those protections that all families deserve. Like we believe all families deserve a safe and affordable place to call home and a healthy and vibrant community. Even in the darkness that we're seeing with this business model, that there's hope out there, that there's an ability for these communities because people know each other. Everybody's sharing the same driveway basically to get to their home, that they are first and foremost willing to fight.
Kevin Borden is the executive director of MH Action, an organization that fights for affordable housing and economic security within manufactured home communities. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and really appreciate the time and care that anyone takes to cover this really important issues.